feeling. Okay,
Uh,
go ahead, Rabbi.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. And I'm very excited that we're spending some time this week, both in this program and in our program tomorrow night, thinking about, talking about, and discussing important issues of planning for end of life and thinking about death as a part of life. We live in a culture that is very death denying, and that is a fact which manifests itself in many different kinds of ways. Death denying culture manifests itself through simple things like avoiding cemeteries, and much more complicated and subtle things like being unwilling to talk about death. Jewish tradition teaches a tremendous amount and has some beautiful wisdom around issues related to the way that leaning into and thinking about death and dying can help us to live more meaningful, more holy, more connected, more committed lives. And Judaism relates specifically to this issue around death with dignity, because Judaism acknowledges that some end of life decisions are not so much about extending life as much as they are about prolonging death. Well, Judaism has a lot to say about that. And like all things in Judaism, we are a multivocal tradition with many different opinions, and they aren't all easily put into boxes of pro or con, but there is wisdom to share. And I hope that this presentation is a voice that adds to our collective wisdom, and that does so even if there are ways in which I feel maybe Jewish law and Jewish teachings come down on a different side. I think it does so within a context of a broader approach to death within Judaism that I think is very powerful and very important for us to engage with. So I'm really thrilled that this is happening, and I hope that all of you will also consider coming to our program tomorrow night with Rabbi Shana Galko, which is called Death After Dinner, and is going to be a participatory conversation about death and dying. So thank you so much for the Faith Community Nursing Program, and to Rayut and to the Healthy Living Group for making sure that this program can happen and that the important discussions that we're continually thinking about them.
Thank you, Rabbi. And now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. You've all read about her amazing background. Eleanor Steen moved to this area about 8 years ago, and she has been a dynamic force in the area, from being head of the Association of University Women to working in all community-based organization. Her background is very well educated, a few masters in education. She was a teacher, a beloved teacher for 40 years in the Hyde Park School District. She taught not only social studies, but languages. She speaks Italian, French, Spanish beautifully, but she is a very warm and significantly caring human being, and very interested in the end of life issues. So without further ado, I really would like to turn the program over to Eleanor. She feels this is a very critical time, as we all do, because there is the Death with Dignity bill. that has been in committee for at least 8 years. And it's very close to coming out if we can get enough public response to get our assemblymen and senators working on it. And Eleanor would say more, say more about that. Eleanor, are you there? Because I have lost you. Oh, okay, Eleanor. Here is Eleanor. Okay. You're on, Eleanor. I lost your audio. Unmute
Back mute.
yourself. Unmute you.
Can you
Okay,
hear
now.
me now?
Yes.
Okay. Well, first, I would like to thank Rabbi Spitzer and you, Ellen, for hosting today's presentation. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share information, which is all I really hope to do today. But I also hope to create some activism for the New York State bill, which you so capably introduced. So I think we can get started and go right to the meat of the program.
We have to, the host has to enable her to share the screen.
She's okay. She's shared. She's the main speaker now.
Okay, but host, disabled participant.
Yeah,
It's okay. You're the primary screen, Eleanor, now.
Oh, I'm the primary screen.
Okay. I just want to say that if people have questions, to please type them into the chat room, and we'll have a few minutes at the end to answer your questions.
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, we need to, okay.
You should be able to share your screen. I made you a co-host.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, here we go. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Are they seeing?
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Good.
Okay. All right. So I know that the topic that we're going to address today is one that we all prefer to ignore. As Rabbi Spitzer said, we are a death-denying society. But I have some important information that I really want to share with you. So we're going to talk about some organizations that deal with end-of-life issues. We're certainly going to focus on the laws that exist and the law that we'd like to create in New York, and some things that you should probably be doing or may have already done to prepare in advance for your own peace of mind. Okay, I think. I usually start my talks by asking people, how many of you expect to leave this earth alive? Nobody leaves alive. We all face the same end. You can't escape it, but we can, to some extent, shape whether it is peaceful or chaotic, whether it is painful or pain-free. And this is why I do what I do. This is my beloved mother. And in 1971, she was diagnosed with bilateral ovarian cancer. And at the time, I was a young mother. I had 3 children, and I certainly did not have any skills in dealing with doctors or hospitals or advocating for her. And as a result, she suffered a miserable death. She suffered for 11 months, and it was truly a horrible death. At the end of the 11 months, my mother was down to something like 60 pounds, and she looks like a survivor of the concentration camp. Nobody should have the kind of death my mother had. I felt enormous guilt because I couldn't do anything positive to help her at the time. And 20 years later, I had to say goodbye to my beloved dog, Princess. And it was at that point that I was introduced to the way we say goodbye to our cats and dogs. the veterinarian gave my dog an injection of a barbiturate. I held her and I sobbed and I cried. And I have to tell you, at that moment, I thought of my mother and I thought, this is really the way people should have an option to leave Earth, that they should be able to die like a dog. And it was a very respectful wish. And then I began to gather information which enabled me to become an advocate. So today's goals are going to be to provide you with some information so that you can make choices, to familiarize you with the laws that already exist and a law that we would like to exist, to familiarize you with organizations that work in this field, and to help you to find the resources that will help you to create your own documents so that your wishes are what predominate when the time comes. I view this as a human right. There was a time when women fought for the right to vote. There was a time when citizens of color faced enormous obstacles. There was a time when people with disabilities faced enormous obstacles. And certainly there was a time, and it may still be with us, where people whose sexual identities didn't conform to what was considered heterosexual normalcy, faced enormous difficulties too. I view the right to a death with dignity as a right for the 21st century. And I also think it is time for New Yorkers to have the right that many people around the world and even in this country already have. So we're going to take a look at the legal situation around the world and in various states, and then talk very briefly about what's happening in our state. Northwestern Europe has been at the forefront for a long time in permitting citizens to achieve a peaceful death. For over 30 years in some places, Belgium, Netherlands, Luxembourg, more recently, Colombia in South America, and just a couple of months ago, Spain legalized physician aid in dying. In the United States, 10 states have physician aid in dying laws, and and DC. Oregon, Washington, and California. So the entire West Coast has essentially what is the same physician aid in dying law. It was passed in Oregon in the middle 1990s. It was challenged for a few years, and in 1997, it became operational. There has not been a single instance of improper use of the physician aid in dying laws in any states. Just this year, New Jersey passed a physician aid in dying law. So in the Northeast, you have Maine, Vermont, New Jersey, and hopefully New York will join the list. And of course, DC. This is what New Yorkers have now. We've all heard stories of terrible end-of-life scenarios. Let's work to change that. Right now, New York law gives you some rights concerning your medical treatment. You may accept or reject certain treatments, and you may determine how much treatment you want and when to stop. You can legally starve yourself to death in New York, but it is illegal right now to medically hasten the process. What New York state legislation would say is, if you are terminally ill and if you meet certain criteria, you should be able to qualify for medical aid in dying. It is in the assembly now, it's known as Bill A4321. That's really easy to remember. It has been introduced many times, but it always gets stalled in committee. And I'm hoping that this is the year that we can change that. In New York State, the law states that a terminally ill, mentally capable adult can request administration. The diagnosis must be 6 months or less to live, and it must be confirmed by 2 doctors. 2 witnesses have to witness the request. No physician or facility is required to participate. It is voluntary for everybody. This is a bill for those who want to access it. It imposes on no one's beliefs. And it is modeled precisely on the Oregon bill. It offers a compassionate option, and it is supported by a lot of different groups, the League of Women Voters, the many medical societies, particularly women's physician organizations, the Unitarian Universalist Society, the American Humanist Society. Most liberal religious organizations are supportive of this bill. It is opposed by some disability groups who fear that there would be coercion. And of course, it is opposed by the Catholic Church. The status of the bill, right now, it is stalled in committee. Working for the passage to get this bill out of committee are 3 very important organizations in New York State: Compassion and Choices, End of Life Choices New York, and Death with Dignity New York. And all of these organizations exist only because of donations and volunteer work. And that's why it's going to become very important, if you support this, that you email or call or send a regular old-fashioned letter to various state assembly people and senators. And for those who say that physician aid in dying is not natural, I would posit that a lot of deaths that currently take place are not natural either. They are horrible. So here are some of the organizations. When my mother needed me, some of these organizations didn't exist. Some of them existed, but in a less visible form than today. I support all of these organizations. I support them with checks. I support them by disseminating information. And I just support them by going to Albany when we could and actually visiting various assemblymen and senators and lobbying in behalf of legislation for New Yorkers. And so my hope is that many of you will become activists and want to support these organizations and the effort to get legalized physician aid in dying in New York State too. These organizations also provide enormously helpful information. If you log on to their websites, you can download pamphlets on how to start the conversation with your family, sample forms, suggestions to help you ease into dealing with this with your doctor. These organizations lobby. they take the issue of death out of the closet. And a side effect of this is that by focusing medical attention on, by focusing public attention on how bad death can be, the medical community has worked on improving better palliative care. My goal is to provide you with options that put you in charge. You decide what you want and you take the reins and go for it.
This is a place to tell them that there's a handout with all the content.
Right, and there is a handout that accompanies this, and your wonderful tech person has posted that somewhere for you to access it.
It's got contact information.
Oh, contact information?
Tell them what it has.
Oh, it's got contact information. My husband is sitting here holding my hand. So we believe the end of life deserves as much beauty, care, respect as the beginning of life. And if you ignore the end of life, you leave yourself vulnerable to some potentially nasty scenarios. An overwhelming percentage of physicians have indicated that they do not want acute hospital care at the end of their lives. And in New York State, over 60% of physicians support a right to die bill, but only 20% of Americans actually get to die at home. About 70% of Americans throughout the nation support physician aid in dying legislation, but only 22% of Americans live in states or jurisdictions where they have that right. So we'll start with the various options at the end of life. Hospice. For New Yorkers, hospice is our only option at this time. Hospice focuses on palliative care, comfort care, and the eligibility is usually when the prognosis is death within 6 months. Hospice is it varies because it is a county function. So what is possible in one county may not be possible in another county. And I'm going to tell you the story now of one person who was in hospice up here. This was Amanda's partner. Amanda is the energy, the brains, the dynamo behind Compassion and Choices New York, and she works out of Albany. Amanda's partner was diagnosed with a terminal condition and went into a critical episode while in hospice care. It happened on a weekend, and they were unable to reach hospice and get sufficient morphine. And Amanda's partner died a very unpleasant death while in hospice. So while hospice has a wonderful reputation, there are some horror stories. Compassion and Choices New York is the leading organization to secure passage of a law that's going to give all eligible New Yorkers the right to make a decision. If you oppose this, you suffer no imposition. No one is forced to do anything that conflicts with his or her principles. Compassion and Choices was the energy and the engine behind the successful story in New Jersey. That law went into effect in 2021. A state boundary should not keep New Yorkers from having the same rights as their fellow citizens in New Jersey. Hospice focuses on legislation. Compassion and Choices focuses on legislation, information, and helping you directly with your end-of-life planning. And end-of-life planning really means you're going to have some papers in place. These are known as advance directives. You document what you want. You have a living will. Your living will says, yes, I want this treatment. No, I don't want that treatment. You may have a healthcare power of attorney. You may decide to register to donate organs or your body. You may have a DNR order, a DNR.
That is.
Final Exit Network also provides a very good online resource guidance. If you have questions or concerns, you can actually call Final Exit and they will put you in touch with a trained and sympathetic guidance person, a counselor. On their website, they have essentially a lot of information, just as Compassion and Choices. So you have two sources. Final Exit Network is a bit different from Compassion and Choices. Final Exit Network focuses less on changing the law than more on providing information, resources, and support for people who are actually suffering from untreatable conditions and have made the decision that they want to end their own lives. The website publishes literature. Final Exit also provides personal exit guides. These people have been trained and they will meet and talk to people. They will explain the guidelines. They are there to inform, comfort, and to protect. And the guides in return are protected by the First Amendment, which protects freedom of speech. It is important to note that FEN does not assist in a suicide. FEN does not charge for its services. No person associated with FEN benefits monetarily from participating. FEN will do an intake process, and if you are judged to meet its criteria, you will then have available to you all the resources and advice. Over the last couple of years, I have received calls from people who are in truly dire straits, and I have put them in touch with trained FEN counselors, and that is what FEN does. FEN's vision is that nobody should suffer a protracted and miserable death, that education and training can help you to avoid that. And FEN is very active throughout the country, especially in states that do not have physician aid in dying legislation. FEN guides travel to wherever they need to be. FEN believes that educating people and helping them to manage their deaths is an ethical course of action. FEN does research to increase people's choices on ways to peacefully end their lives. FEN gives legal support to members whose advance directives are not being honored. FEN advocates for making self-determination more socially acceptable. And FEN has the legal resources if you encounter opposition or resistance in having your wishes followed. In other words, FEN has within the organization a medical team and a legal team. And these people work for you at no cost. So now, your documents. Getting your papers in order is the first step. If we were in the same room, I'd say, can I see a show of hands? How many of you have a living will, a healthcare proxy? And, you know, maybe half the hands would go up. This is the hardest step. And all of these documents and forms are available online at Compassion and Choices and Final Exit.
I could just add in that
So what
we
have you
also have
done?
several.
Just
Sorry,
talking about the
sorry for
subject
interrupting.
is hard, but by being here today, you've taken the first step and it gets easier. Remember, nobody leaves this earth alive. Death is the universal experience. I have already spoken with my internist. He listened, he is supportive. My husband and I have our living wills, we have our healthcare proxies, and we update them every couple of years. So you've taken your first step, you're here to learn. I'm going to tell you another story. My longest term girlfriend, a girl I went to high school with, and that goes back decades and decades and decades, had a sister. And 3 years ago, her sister had a stroke and went into the hospital and was immediately put on a ventilator. My friend called me because she knows what I do. The sister had no documents. My friend and her brother were at loggerheads because my friend wanted her sister taken off the ventilator, and the brother wanted everything done possible to keep the sister alive as long as possible. And it took 3 weeks for the brother and sister to resolve the issue so that the ventilator was turned off. Nobody knows what my friend's sister was thinking, feeling, sensing, aware of during those 3 weeks. But when they turned the ventilator off, the sister died within 5 minutes. My personal feeling is that that qualifies as a horror story. That should not happen. So go online, look at Compassion and Choices. They have a really great section called The Conversation Getting Started. Talk to your significant other, talk to your family, talk to your close friends, talk to your doctor. If your doctor is not sympathetic, maybe find another doctor. But check it out and get moving on this. Choose your people very, very carefully. So again, I'll tell you what I've done. My husband is my primary person. I trust him totally. My oldest son is my secondary person. But because sometimes my husband and my oldest son and I are all in the same car together, and heaven forbid there should be an accident, I have a third healthcare proxy, and it is a close friend whom I trust. She happens to be a nurse. These 3 people have access to my papers, and I also carry a copy of all my papers with me. It's in the glove compartment of my car, and that's not a bad thing to do, because if you're in an accident, the police and emergency people will look in the glove compartment. So you review your documents, change it. Your healthcare changes, the laws change, and sometimes what you want changes. Sometimes a little humor gets us through difficult topics.
You see this?
Okay. Go. Change it.
Okay, we're back to the healthcare proxy, the living will, and there is a new form, a dementia provision. Again, the dementia provision is available on Compassion and Choices and Final Exit websites. These are forms that you sign, you determine the conditions, and you change them anytime you want. You can change them on a monthly basis if you want to. The healthcare proxy is the person who's going to speak for you when you can't, and you want to make sure it is a person who has what I would call backbone. who can be forceful, who can be articulate, who doesn't back down, who can't be bullied. You must have a pit bull sometimes to make sure that your wishes are carried out. It has to be somebody you trust and somebody who will be there for you. Your healthcare proxy will act legally in your behalf. It does not have to be a relative. Now, I'm going to broach a topic that may be a little prickly. If you have many children, 2 children, 3 children, and your children may not agree, you can name one child and you may want to tell the other children that you've named one person to carry out your wishes. We have 3 sons, and I have named my oldest son after my husband. I also want to make sure that my other sons cannot interfere. And I had my lawyer draw up a document which specifically prohibits them from interfering. That may make people angry, but I won't be here to deal with the consequences. So you have to do what you're comfortable with.
I'm following you.
What?
I'm following you on
Okay.
the changes.
All right, your living will is going to specifically state what you do want and what you don't want. Some of the things that you should be thinking about: cardiac resuscitation, restarting your heart if it has stopped, mechanical respiration, ventilator or respirator keeps you breathing, artificial nutrition and hydration administered via intravenous methods or a tube directly into the stomach. These measures are all valid if you have a reasonable chance of recovery. They become unnecessary and painful, prolonging interventions if you are terminal.
Ellie,
Okay, remember, you make copies and you put them where people can find them. Keep a copy in your car, keep a copy in your wallet. If you live in Schenectady, a trip to the files office at Ellis Hospital with your documents is very easy. You go in, they copy the documents electronically, and it is on your file. And the same is true of hospitals in Albany. They get electronically copied onto your medical files right up there, your living will, your healthcare proxies, everything. A DNR form is something that is a very personal decision, and you want to talk about this with your doctor only if you have a terminal condition and there's no reasonable chance of you surviving and having a normal or comfortable life. When I mentioned it to my doctor, he said, "You're not ready yet." So it really is not for everybody. It really depends on the situation. The Dementia Provision is based on a study of law and court rulings and other organizations' advanced directives. Final Exit Network feels that it offers you the best legal basis for having your directions followed or for litigating in case your directions are not being followed. This is an evolving situation, and Final Exit is assuming a very active role in this area. So you can contact Final Exit for more information, but this was developed by a Fenn attorney. So what should you be doing? Well, I'm hoping that you're all going to take action and support the bill that is presently in committee, A4321 in the Assembly, S6471 in the Senate. I'm hoping that if you haven't already done so, you're going to get your documents in order. And I'm hoping you're going to support Compassion and Choices and Final Exit with a check and by spreading the word. These organizations exist to help us at a very vulnerable time of life. I wish I had known about these in 1972 when my mother really needed help, but I didn't. I was totally ignorant, and I was timid, and I was inarticulate. And boy, have I changed over the decades. My husband is laughing. But this is really for my mother. Nobody should die the way my mother died. And if I can save anybody from a bad end of life scenario, then that's a tribute. That makes my mother's miserable death less miserable. So I hope you will take action. And I guess now I have finished my presentation and I will take questions.
So now,
Okay,
stop the share.
there, before, I see three, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear
Yes,
you.
we can.
Okay, I don't know if I'm doing this right, Josh. You know, I'm a Luddite with the computer. I see three questions in the,
And before we get to the questions, I just wanted to jump in quickly. To say that, first of all, the Jewish community, the Rabbinical Assembly, our conservative movement, has an ethical will document and some end-of-life wishes documents that are deeply informed by Jewish tradition. So, and they also work legally. They are both acceptable from a state, New York State point of view, and couch all of those decision-making questions in context of Jewish medical ethics and the Jewish end-of-life values, and I highly recommend using the Jewish ethical will documents produced by the Rabbinical Assembly as you're working through your documents. I couldn't agree more with Eleanor that it's important to have the documents done and available and accessible, and to have had those hard conversations about who you want to be representing you in the end of life. And you want to make sure that that person that you choose is also aware of what methodological decisions you made, right? Like what values go behind the choices that you made specifically, because sometimes the values are just as important in terms of making those decisions, because not every case is listed in the ethical will. You know, they try to cover as much as they can, but not every case can be documented. So you want to make sure that you have those good conversations about what values are animating your principles. And since this is a synagogue event, I feel compelled to say that Jewish tradition does have what to say on what the values should be that you are engaging with. And I'm happy to engage with you on that a little more. So just wanted to jump in and share that.
before I answer the questions, just to pick up on what both Eleanor and the rabbi said, New York State, I don't know if everybody can hear me. I hope so. New York State has a wonderful form called a MOST form, Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. I'm holding it up. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. This is a form that has more detailed information about sort of end-of-life care in terms of when you have chronic illness and other problems that needs to be filled out with your physician. So it comprises essentially a physician's orders. It covers things from DNR and CPR to other more detailed things about antibiotics, artificially administered fluids and nutrition, hospitalizations, transfers, intubation, medical ventilation, and other forms. Everyone probably at a certain age, and definitely anybody who goes into a nursing home or an assisted living facility is supposed to fill out this form. It was developed by Blue Cross and Blue Shield up in Monroe County, but it's used universally throughout New York State and other states. And it has all kinds of things that you go through and make the decisions, and your physician will sign it. So what it does is it gives you more strength when you're talking to people to enforce your decisions, for example, regarding a DNR. Okay.
Good, very good point.
You can download that form from the New York State site, and you can download it from other sites. And I just lost my screen, so I can't get to the chats. Josh, can you see the chats?
Yes, I can.
If I click on it, will I get it?
No.
Yes.
Oh.
You have it?
Okay, I just got it. We have a question from Roberta, who has a very pertinent question. Ellis Hospital will be under the Catholic dictates when it merged with St. Peter's. How will this affect our end-of-life decisions? I can say that this is something that the committee that's working under Michelle Osterlich, it's one of the issues that people are definitely concerned about it. It might listen options. I have to share with you that at present, Ellis Hospital has a wonderful palliative care program. They did a presentation to the synagogue a few years back, and I hope none of that would be affected. Eleanor, do you have anything you can add, please? Go ahead.
Yes. I think that anyone who goes into a Catholic hospital and is facing terminal illness is also facing a very difficult situation. I had a heart procedure at St. Peter's a couple of years ago, and I made a document which I signed and my husband signed, and I made the hospital accept it. And it said, if I should go into an irreversible terminal state, I was to be immediately transferred to Albany Medical Center. And they took it at St. Peter's because I didn't want to linger if I went into some kind of cardiac arrest in a Catholic hospital. I wanted out fast. So you can do that. You could talk to your lawyers. I think the person who's spearheading the concerns over Trinity or St. Peter's taking over Ellis is Michelle Osterlich. And I credit her with being a wonderful activist in this regard. So this is out of my purview. I deal primarily with the organizations I've mentioned and with the specific concerns you may have regarding your documentation. But certainly if we have one hospital in Schenectady and it's controlled by a Catholic organization, we have a big problem.
Okay, I might add that if anybody has concerns, and they should email Michelle Osterlich. She has a very strong working committee. I'm on that committee. You can also email me your concerns. I have to put a plug in not only for end-of-life decisions that would be affected by this merger, but also maternal and child health decisions. Okay, we have a very interesting question from Bernard. It says, does anyone have any more information on the 6-month period and how that criteria is arrived at?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? My husband's cell phone went off.
Okay, does anyone have any more information on the 6-month period and how that criteria is arrived at?
2 physicians have to certify that your normal anticipated life expectancy is 6 months or less.
Okay. And another question from Lynn is, how does life insurance handle assisted suicide?
There is no problem. First of all, if you exit with FEN's help, only you and your exit guide know what went on, because what is left is a person who is dead and all appearances died from natural causes. There is no indication that death was hastened.
Okay. And we have one more question about who keeps the most form from Roberta. The most form, you probably make 2 copies of it. One that you keep. Maybe you'll make 3 because I think Eleanor's idea of keeping one in your car or somehow maybe scan it into your cell phone if so you always have it. And your physician has one. And it should be reviewed every year. And one of the benefits is if the EMT comes to your house and sees that forms, they see it as a signed doctor's order and they can follow your guidelines. Okay. Are there any other questions? I'm trying to see. I don't see any other questions. So I really would like to sincerely thank Eleanor. Wait, we have another question. Okay, we have a question concerning the 6-month period. What might happen in the case of ALS where 6 months is an arbitrary period?
Okay, ALS is a particularly difficult situation because a person can linger for years in an increasingly debilitated state. If a person with ALS wants to hasten death, they have to do it while they are able to do certain things for themselves. In the case of states where there is physician aid in dying, they have to be able to swallow, because all of the laws in this country require that a patient who qualifies and has the medication take that medication himself or herself. If it's a person who's accessing final exit, there's a little more leeway, but because of certain privacy issues, I'm going to say that somebody with those questions should contact final exit and discuss the issue with a trained counselor. But final exit has exit methods that rely on using an inert gas, for example, so that you are inhaling what feels like normal air, but eventually you go to sleep, and it's a terminal sleep. And it is painless and stress-free, but that's something that should be discussed with final exit.
Okay, and Lois has asked a very good question. Where would you keep the form in the house? I assume you're referring to all the forms that Eleanor has talked about?
Right.
And,
Ellen, I have a drawer in my office, and it's got a red card on the front of the drawer of the desk, and it says, important forms in case of death. I also have a magnet and a sticker on my refrigerator. And in the refrigerator, in the freezer, actually, I have a little baggie with the necessary papers, the forms, and those are available from your local fire departments usually. When we moved up here, I went to the Schenectady Fire Department downtown, and they gave me everything I needed.
It's becoming a common practice that the EMTs will look at the refrigerator
yeah,
and in the refrigerator, and that's where they expect to find it.
yeah, they're called vial of life, and you can get them from your local fire department, and they look for it in your refrigerator, usually in the door near the butter compartment.
Right.
In that, you have all your medication information, your doctors, your next contacts.
My phone is
In
right there.
addition, some people are now putting in a note where you can find all these documents that we're talking about, because obviously they can't fit in a little file of life.
Right.
But that was a very good question, and I think it's universally known that around the country that people have a vial of life and they put them in their refrigerator. Some people give you a sticker to put on your refrigerator saying you have a vial of life.
Right.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
No.
Okay, well, I would like to thank, first of all, Eleanor for a very interesting, informative, and enlightening presentation. It gives us an awful lot to think about, and for me, some work to be done about getting papers organized. And I'd like to thank Rabbi for his comments and agreeing to have this presentation. And I'd also love to thank Josh, our administrator in the office, for his invaluable help, and for Jack Mincer for doing the flyer and getting the information out. And I thank everybody who attended.
And Ellen, I have to thank my tech support because
Okay.
without Jesse, this
Okay, we'll
would
give
not
them
have
a
happened.
We'd all be lost without our tech support.
Right.
Just to let you know that Healthy Living Group, which is part of the Synagogue's Faith Community Program, meets every Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and we discuss all kinds of health-related issues. It's an interactive meeting, and anybody is welcome to join. So I wish everybody a very good week, a happy Memorial Day weekend, and I look forward to seeing people again. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Ellen, thank you for all the work that you put into putting this meeting together.
Well, thank you, Karen, and thank you for your help.
Okay.
Okay, Karen? No.